Hey, good morning, everybody. Good to be with you today. We're still in Mark chapter 6. Remember, yesterday Jesus had got the news that John the Baptist, his friend, had died. So he took his disciples and he went to a solitary place for a little while. But by force of need, the compassion that he had in his heart and the needs that he saw amongst the people that were following him, he gets back in the horse again and continues his ministry of caring and showing compassion. And it says so beautifully in chapter 6 that Jesus saw out there, he had compassion on the people. The disciples came to Jesus and they said, Jesus, we have a problem. These people have been with us all day. They are now really hungry. Have you got any suggestions? So Jesus' suggestion took them by surprise. Jesus said to his disciples, you go and feed them. And they said to Jesus, how are we going to do that? There's no supermarkets nearby. The people haven't got money. They're starving. What are you going to do? Jesus said, you go and you feed them. Go and see what you can find. A little while later, the disciples had met a little boy, apparently, and he gave them 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and they brought that back to Jesus, almost cynically, saying to Jesus, hey, Jesus, this is all we could find. The mission is over. We have not going to be able to feed these people. So Jesus did something that must have shocked the disciples completely. He says, take what you have in your hand and go and feed the people. And imagine the amazement of those disciples when that which they had in their hand, those 5 loaves and those few little fish, they continued just to break it and break it and break it, and it just never ended. And at the end of the exercise, they collected basketfuls of remains, and they fed 5,000 people that day, at least 5,000 people. And isn't it intriguing that Jesus doesn't ask you to do what you can't do? He will only ask you to do what he wants you to do, and then he will equip you to do that. Is, he will not ask you to do the impossible, because if you did the impossible, then you would get the glory. Jesus will only ever ask you to do that which is possible, because he's the one that does the impossible, and therefore the glory remains with him. That's a wonderful principle, that God does that. But here's the other principle that goes hand in hand with that. He says, what have you got in your hand? Now, this is a great thing that has revolutionized many of the church people's lives, is to be confronted by God to say, the need is great. And you say, Lord, I see the need. People are in need. What am I going to do? And God would smile and say, what do you got in your hand? Just use what you have in your hand. You do the possible and allow me to do the impossible. And look how many ministries have been grown by people just using what they have in their hands. Take that little thing, that little talent, that little ability, that little resource, that little something, and say, God, this is all I've got, but I know in my hands it is very small, but in your hands, God, this could make a huge difference. Use what you have in your hand. Now, that little kid had brought his lunch to Jesus and said, Jesus, hey, this is all I've got in my hand. And Jesus took that little thing and turned it into something that was a blessing to thousands and thousands of people. It's a biblical principle. Moses was asked by God, what have you got in your hand? Moses said, I have a staff. And God said, well, let's use that to open the Red Sea. And Moses held it up and the sea was open. David, what have you got in your hand? And he said, well, I've just got a slingshot and 5 stones. And God said, well, that'll do. Let's go and kill that giant. We see how God uses people who use what they have in their hands. Now, you will never have everything that you need in order to fulfill God's plan for what you need to do, because there's that element of him saying, you do what you do and I'll do the rest. If you can use what you have for somebody else, then that's your deal. But if you use that little bit that you think nobody's going to be able to use at all, that small talent, that small gift, watch what God will do when you put it into his hands. So have a look today at your own life. There are needs all around us, are there not? At the workplace, at the school, in the church, in the community. And there are needs that Jesus is saying, hey, you go and feed them. Don't ask me to feed them. Don't go and pray for them. That's not what you need to do. You need to do something. You go and feed them. You go and meet that need. And the need may be huge. You may be saying, I'm never going to meet this need. Of course you're not. Of course you're not. Just use what you have in your hand. And when you use what you have in your hand, allow God to do the rest. I hope you can make sense of this, because it's a big and profound truth today. Just use what you got in your hand You do the possible, He'll do the rest. Have a fantastic day, you people. See you soon.